The opinions on Scoop Squad, Truth Squad are those of the hosts and the guests, and not those of WVRC Media. Copyright 2023.
I'm Ashley Switzer, and I'm your host for the Scoop Squad Truth Pod. Did you catch that?
I caught that.
We did.
Yes.
I like it. We changed our name. We changed our logo. We uploaded our new logo this week, thanks to my incredibly talented marketer of a husband.
He is good.
Yeah. Scoop Squad Truth Pod. But hey, you can still find us on all the usual local or podcast platforms that you access on WCHS Network website. You can still email us at scoopsquadwv@gmail.com. So, we're all in the same place. We just look a little bit different.
But you can also find us on Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah, what's our Twitter handle?
I believe it is #ScoopSquadWV.
Okay.
And then we're coming soon to YouTube. And you can get the episodes on YouTube. It won't be on video, so to speak, because we're not quite there yet.
Okay, so I don't have to put on makeup and brush my hair.
You've never needed to put on makeup. Just let me say that.
I love you.
But you might want to brush your hair.
Good.
So those are good things coming up.
Awesome.
So if anybody wants to sponsor the YouTube broadcast channel, for us, that availability is out there, as well as any other sponsorship availability. We ask that you subscribe, ask your friends to subscribe, ask people you don't like to subscribe.
Share,
and keep sharing.
All right, that's my executive producer, Ron Hughes, who compliments me and is just so kind to me.
Compliments her, and I compliment her.
That's right. Good one. We have got in the studio with us tonight, we've got two of our, what would you call them? Contributors.
Regular contributors.
JB Akers, a local attorney, is in the studio again tonight. And we also have Tristan Leavitt. Tristan is a transplant here in West Virginia. He's originally from Idaho, but he's working on some really cool stuff. His wife Brittany is from here. They chose West Virginia to come back to and raise their family and work. And actually, Tristan does a lot of work in D.C., as you'll find out, but they chose West Virginia as their home, and he is a frequent commentator and pundit here at the Scoop Squad.
Right. As a regular contributor, you're not forced to be here every week like we are.
Right. I mean, I make JB come a lot of times. But, there's just some things that listen, I'm a woman, and I'm one woman, and I don't have time to... I wish I did have time to investigate and read up on everything. I just don't. And there's just some things that JB has more time to do than me, right, JB? Is that right? Is that fair or not fair?
I mean, everybody only has so much time in the day, and
that's
plus
right.
You've got a little kid who swims, and it takes up 23 hours a day most days.
Yeah, speaking of, we were in Morgantown for a 3-day swim meet this past weekend.
Yeah, it sounds like a week-long event.
It was brutal. All right, let's get right to it. We have not had Sherry Johnson on for quite a while, but she is on the phone. She's going to give us a Calhoun County update real fast. Sherry, are you there?
I sure am.
Hey, girl.
Great. So tell us more about the corruption. Tell us more about the corruption in County Commission and the school board.
Give us the hot points.
Well, the hot point is we had a great county commission meeting on Monday that I think we're seeing progress where they're finally understanding that they are no longer the boss of us.
Excellent.
And that the opinions of the community matters. Mm-hmm. And they had $1.2 million that had been set aside for broadband issues in Calhoun County, but that fell through. And so then what the people had wanted all along was for the expansion of water services, because we have people up in the West Fork area of our community and on the eastern side of our county that have no running water in a lot of their homes, or they have low pressure that requires them to strategize bath time and cooking and to make sure that they don't use up all of their water in one evening.
Right.
So our goal was to get the county commission to look to expand the water system, and they took that $1.2 million. They did give $200,000 of it to Mini Hamilton Health Systems because they're expanding, and the hospital is an important asset in our community, so we certainly don't want to deprive them of anything.
They also took over the emergency ambulance service too, didn't they?
Yes. When we lost our ambulance service because of the dereliction of duties there, the hospital took it over and have been doing a good job in running that. So they're expanding the hospital. They're going to provide a lot more services in the community, and they're working on a $19 million project. And so they asked for some assistance, some community, some effort from the community on that front, and they gave them $200,000, which was great.
Great.
But the $1,092,000 that was remaining, they have committed to water projects in Calhoun County. So that, even though that's not something that's going to happen overnight, and a lot of it is engineering money and things like that, it's progress.
That's right.
So
do you think any of that would have happened if you and Crystal hadn't been shining a light of truth onto the commission?
Yeah, and I don't, not just Crystal and I, but that the Calhoun Citizens for Accountability group, all of those people coming forward, and we had a protest yesterday morning prior to the county commission meeting where there was about 30 people that stood out front of the courthouse with signs, and they were peaceful, they were respectful, but they were answering questions, and we had and our new county commissioner, Craig Arthur, he spoke to the group and encouraged them, and we had a prayer session there on the courthouse for the community, and it was a good, it set the tone for the day, and people, there was no animosity. All three commissioners behaved themselves.
Wow.
So even Mr. Helmick behaved himself yesterday, which was pretty impressive.
That is impressive.
We are distantly related to him by some kind of fifth, sixth, seventh cousin.
You keep rubbing that in
I
my
know.
face.
I'm gonna send you the family tree so you can see it.
So Sherry, tell us about the superintendent, school board.
Superintendent. So the school board agenda has been out for weeks, or for a couple weeks anyway, and there was no surprises on it. It was just a typical standard agenda. Well, then all of a sudden yesterday, another new thing that has transpired since the last time I talked to you is the liberal side of our newspaper, the Calhoun Chronicle. There was a guy there that was pretty much controlling the narrative on the paper completely to the side of the left, and the right had no voice in the newspaper, which is how senior citizens in Calhoun County get the bulk of their information. Well, that guy was fired. And the new lady that is operating the newspaper now, she is printing both sides of the issue, both the Democrat and Republican side. They both have a voice. And so we're having great strides on that side.
Wow.
I think I was standing next to that guy at the county commission meeting I attended, and when they did the Pledge of Allegiance, where it says there at the end, and justice for all.
Yeah.
And he said, for those that can afford it.
Oh, he didn't like that. Okay.
Oh, no, well, and he would say, instead of indivisible, he would say divided. So he was very...
Just contentious. That's just...
Yeah.
Ugh, what a...
Yeah.
Yes.
What a grouchy
the
guy.
The girl that has taken over,
Yeah.
she's doing an amazing job. Like I said, she's covering everything. And she and I have a working relationship where she's running Ridgeview News stuff and I'm running Chronicle stuff. So if we get information that the other one doesn't get it for whatever reason. Well, yesterday she got... For some reason, the government doesn't want to give me information. I don't know why.
Same.
Yeah.
So she gets, because that has been the Democratic paper, she gets a lot of information from everybody. And yesterday, the school board sent her a new agenda, which they did not bother to send to me. But ironically, I'm friends with the media.
Sure.
So they sent me their copy. And on that was the resignation of Kelly Whitesell, our superintendent, who has been a thorn in our side as far as getting the school system with all of the issues over the curriculum and all those things that we had to fight.
Yeah.
She was just a real thorn in our side.
Well, wasn't she was also in charge when the former sheriff brought real guns and drug paraphernalia to the high school, right?
Yes, she was. And
for the kids to pick up and play with.
For the kids to dry fire at each other. So, yes, she was in charge then. Of course, she did not know, in her defense, she did not know that was going on. But, so yeah,
It's her job.
It was a management issue that she should have understood. If she had done her job, she would have made those orders clear before that ever happened.
Well, you know what, Sherry? I've got a smile on my face. I'm happy. This is the first, one of few updates that has made me happy. I'm so happy to hear all of it.
Well, it looks like the message is being sent.
Yeah, it really does. You guys are being heard loud and clear. Change is happening. People are cooperating and working together. So congratulations and come back.
I hope you'll have me back.
Absolutely.
Keep us up to date.
Yes.
I sure will.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon, Sherry.
Okay, you guys have a great night.
You
Thanks.
too. Hey, so before we talk to Sherry from Calhoun County, I just want to kind of give everybody a rundown. I made notes. This is not a promise that we're going to get to everything, but I do want to talk a little bit about Regatta. I want to talk about the city council meeting that happened July 3rd at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the allegations of people making toward the city for arresting homeless people, right before Regatta. I want to talk about the county commission meeting. I want to talk about Kevin Baker. I have an update, Kevin Baker and the building commission. I'd like to talk a little bit about, JB, about our explosive, surprising, shocking podcast last week that we with Jenny Harless in her experience with the chief of police here. And last but not least, and actually Tristan's going to be first because he's too good to save for last, I think.
He's too important.
He's too important. We are going to talk first of all to Tristan, one of our contributors here, Tristan Leavitt. He is with Empower Oversight, is that right? Empower Oversight, which is a 501c3 here in West Virginia, right?
It's actually based out of Virginia.
Okay. But you guys protect whistleblowers who allege abuse, waste, and fraud in government, right?
Correct.
And you, Tristan, represent Gary Shapley in the IRS Hunter Biden whistleblower case. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I have seen you on Fox News several times with the Golden Dome behind you, which is so super cool. And I just kind of you can give us an update now. You've been on a couple of times and you haven't really been able to say a whole lot. But, and I brought JB in because he's going to kind of help me facilitate this conversation a little bit. Because you guys are both lawyers, and I'm not. Although I like to pretend that I am sometimes.
I'm not either. But my mom always accused me of being a lawyer.
So I can probably ask good questions. I've always been accused of being argumentative and disruptive. And
Lawyer-like.
It's a good reason to become a lawyer. That got me there.
I miss my calling. So why don't you give us an update? What's going on?
Sure. So when we first were able to reach out to Congress about Gary Shapley's allegations, he's a senior supervisor in the IRS, and he has for the last 3 years overseen the Hunter Biden investigation into taxes. They were partnering with the FBI and the Delaware U.S. Attorney's Office because there were a host of charges that they were looking at. In order for him to talk about those to Congress, even though he'd made protected whistleblower disclosures inside the IRS and to various inspectors general, for him to talk to Congress, he needed to go through a special law that protects the privacy of taxpayers. So it is the same law that Trump's tax returns were voted out on by the House Ways and Means Committee the other year. And they have a whistleblower provision. So we had to request for Congress to designate me and my co-counsel Mark Lytle to receive that confidential taxpayer information so we could advise Gary. And then once they did, we helped him sort his information to take to Congress. They made the choice to vote to release it publicly, which is why I'm now able to talk about it. And with that, they released both the transcript of his interview as well as various documents, and also the transcript of the case agent's interview. He is a Democrat working on the case. He has been on it even longer than Gary for 5 years, and together their allegations combine, alleging that they can really be put into two buckets. The first is that in various ways the investigation into Hunter Biden and his taxes was curbed and curtailed because the Delaware U.S. Attorney's Office wouldn't let them follow various leads, including those that would relate to Joe Biden. And the second category of things relates to the independence that U.S. Attorney's Office had. So Attorney General Merrick Garland has told the public and told Congress, including my former boss, Senator Chuck Grassley, that Weiss had absolute independence. There would be no political interference. He could do all of this on his own. And in reality, he had to both get the permission of the D.C. U.S. Attorney, a Biden appointee, the Southern District of California, a Biden appointee, And if those didn't work, he had to seek permission from the Attorney General.
And I would take it that those didn't work, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And so that's really where things have stood. No one has really touched on the underlying investigation and how that's been blocked, but Merrick Garland has been pretty assertive in saying, no, Weiss had all the authority, and Weiss hasn't come out and flat out rejected that. He sent a letter to Congress just yesterday where he said, well, I did need to go and I talked to them about having some special authority to bring it, but I never asked for that special authority. He's again kind of just twisting himself in circles, and he flat out told investigators, not just from the IRS, but from the FBI last fall, that he wasn't the deciding official on the Hunter Biden charges. And that meeting was documented, and that's already out there publicly. And so it's really drawn the spotlight into Weiss. At the end of the day, whether he wants to take the responsibility himself or whether he's going to claim that it was someone else, there were significant tax charges against Hunter Biden. The 2014 and 2015 tax years, there were felony charges because of money he made from the Ukrainian energy company Burisma.
I was going to say, go over those charges.
Yeah. Hunter Biden's own tax advisor told him in 2017 he needed to file amended returns because in 2014 he did not include the Burisma income that he made, $400,000. And so filing a false return is a felony. And he was advised he needed to do that he needed to pay additional on his 2015 taxes, and he just never did it. And so the IRS recommended charges for several years, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And this recent plea deal just relates to 18 and 19. And in part, they can't go back to those 14 and 15 years because Hunter was living in D.C. at the time, and because the D.C. U.S. Attorney refused to join with Weiss in bringing those charges. And so those have now been lost to the statute of limitations. So those all that Burisma income, there will never be, those
No
charges
justice.
will never happen. There won't be
Taxpayers lost out on that, right?
That's right, as well as on the full information of what happened with those years, because some of those, obviously there are allegations out there right now about whether Joe Biden had anything to do with that Burisma income. But so this is where it stands, and there continues to be information kind of dripping out. At this point, we assume that Gary will be called to testify before Congress, but new information continues to come out, and we strongly believe that it will continue to vindicate the claims that he's made.
And what's also happened to Gary Shapley, I think, has there been retaliation tactics used against him? Absolutely. And some of those fall into the category where they can be, we filed a complaint with the Office of Special Counsel, the agency where I was formerly the number 2, the principal deputy. Right.
Most retaliation for whistleblowers is pretty subtle, right? So the law sets a threshold that to be a personnel action, it has to meet certain criteria. We had a call today with the IRS Inspector General's office, just updating them on various ways. His supervisor hasn't talked to him for 6 weeks.
I was going to say, is he still working?
He is, and he's still a supervisor. But his supervisor, the assistant special agent in charge, who has been
doesn't talk to him.
Doesn't talk to him. She won't return communications. She sends very brisk emails. They've been trying to sideline him on various cases. I mean, it's all the typical things that you see in any garden variety whistleblower retaliation case.
I've seen this in several movies too.
Yeah.
It really just seems like a movie. I mean, it seems like it couldn't happen. So what are the charges now? Like if they can't go back to 2014 and 2015, is that the...
Is it a 7-year?
It's a 6-year statute of limitations.
Okay.
And they were extending it through what's called a tolling agreement. The details don't matter as much, right? But at this stage, what happens to those charges, we don't know. There will be, a judge needs to hear the plea agreement. We don't know what the details of that plea agreement are because the Justice Department hasn't made it public. But regardless of whether that plea agreement is accepted or the Justice Department goes back and, again, re-examine some of this, the prosecutors who submitted the plea agreement were assigned to the case, it appears, like a month ago, because the assistant U.S. attorney who's investigated it for 5 years was taken off the case, it appears. So you have these people at the last minute coming in, all these years of evidence, and saying, well, we're just going to do this plea deal on these very minimal charges.
Good grief.
So we don't know what will happen with that. Gary's motivation coming forward wasn't necessarily to get specific charges one way or the other. He doesn't care about any one taxpayer over another. It's just they've been stopped in their investigation, and then after all of this, the U.S. attorney was not able to bring the charges that they were recommending.
Right. That's got to be very frustrating for him.
This is the same case. One of the charges that was dropped, it was ancillary to what your client's involved in, but the felon possession of a firearm was not also part of the same investigation, and as part of the plea agreement, they dropped that charge. And that one was clear cut as far as I could tell. And there have been a lot of Americans who've gone to prison and served substantial prison sentences for being a felon in possession. And there was no excuse I could think of. They just let that one go and said, well, if you'll accept these other charges on the misdemeanor stuff, we'll let this serious felony charge go. And I thought it's not related directly to your client, but I think it adds substance to part of what you're saying, which is clearly this isn't being handled like a normal criminal investigation.
Absolutely. And those IRS investigators were fully aware the gun charge was all part of the same investigation. And there were several elements of their charges that were slam dunk. Even the 2018 year, which is part of the plea agreement, that includes charges where Hunter Biden charged as business expenses payments for prostitutes, for flying prostitutes across the country, for a hotel room for his purported drug dealer. And
those aren't really allegations. I mean, he clearly did those things.
He clearly charged those, and his own accountants, and what I'm saying is in the transcript from Gary Shapley, because it can't be released otherwise, but his own accountants said you can't charge this as that, and he insisted on it, and so they had him sign.
Right.
I am affirming, they're just giving their advice, but I'm affirming these were business expenses, so that was a very clear felony charge for 2018, and Justice Department guidelines say if you have a felony charge available, you don't plead down to a misdemeanor, but they did in this case.
Yeah, there's a standing memo still from, is it the Ashcroft memo that's still standing? That's their policy.
Yeah.
And they let those go.
Wow.
Right.
Well, I think this is a good time to take a break because we've been hard at it, and I think you folks have probably needed a little break.
Ryan gave me the 5. Can I ask one more question before we break?
Well, you can, sure.
Okay. I just want to know, how did you get the dome? Like, where did you record your Fox interview, and how did you get the dome in the background?
There is a studio that's actually in the same building as the Charleston Gazette-Mail.
Oh, yes, of course.
Dan Shreve is.
Yes. I know Dan.
Yep.
He and I are starting to become buddies.
Dan is awesome. Yeah,
Dan's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
He's got like the only uplink to get to like Fox and CNN and places like that.
Okay, super cool. So the mystery is solved.
Dan Shreve's a very good guy.
He's a great guy.
He's a volunteer coach for some school, for some
volleyball at GW.
Yeah.
And track.
And he's a St. Albans High School graduate, just like yours truly. So
he is
very nice man.
He's a nice guy, and he coached Gracie a little bit in volleyball, and he's also done a couple of sessions with Micah. And he and Michael are really good friends. He's just a good one of the, he's one of the good
spends
ones.
A lot of time helping kids.
Yes, he does.
Don't blame him for being in the building that he's in. He's
so
just
that's
renting
cool.
space.
That's right. All right, so we'll take a break, and we'll be right back. Scoop Squad Truth Squad is brought to you in part by T Graphics on Charleston's west side. For 38 years, this Charleston-based business has provided in-house professional screen printing, commercial-grade heat transfers, very important to set us apart from the cricket world, and embroidery, promotional products, advertising, specialties, distribution, serving clients locally, regionally, and nationally. Superior service, quality goods, and on-time delivery. Call 304-345-4816 or go to teegraphics.com. That's teegraphics.com. And by Quinn Computers. With many of us working from home, connectivity is more important than ever. Let Quinn Computers in Spring Hill take care of all your computer challenges. Computer and laptop service, all brands, network troubleshooting and repair, wireless network, VPN installation and support, security and firewall installation and support, backup and recovery service, remote systems administration. www.quinntechnology.com. That's www.quinntechnology.com.
You're listening to the Scoop Squad Truth Squad, brought to you in part by Quinn Computers in Spring Hill and by Eggplant on Bridge Road.
And you're back with the second scoop of the Scoop Squad Truth Pod.
You're doing very well with
know.
that. I don't know that I would have carried that through and remembered that we changed the name.
It's easier to say.
Yeah. Well, and it's not redundant.
Do you guys get it? Scoop Squad Truth Pod instead of like Scoop Squad Podcast? Okay, I'm just making sure.
Well, Scoop Squad is already taken by somebody else in the country, so we couldn't do that.
It has to do with scooping doggy doo.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Yeah, what do you know?
You do a little bit of that on here
Yeah.
sometimes.
Just a little bit.
We
Speaking
run
of,
into a lot of that. And also, I'm going to have to request a mirror so I can see Ryan's cues, because I'm
Yes.
facing you and not him, and you're facing him.
yeah, so he can give me the cue and I'll give you the cue. All right, so we're back with JB Akers and Ron Hughes and Tristan Leavitt and myself, Ashley Switzer. And we're talking to Tristan about the whistleblower case that he is so heavily involved in. And so I take it you've had to make multiple trips back from D.C., right? You've been very busy on the road.
Yeah, almost every week.
And, so what's up next week? Where do you go? What's next here?
Well, there's additional stuff. There may or may not be a hearing in D.C. So if that
Okay.
happens, then we'll go there to be with him and to help prep him for the hearing. And,
Is that still with Gary and the Hunter Biden case?
Yep, that's right.
And the other guy who is you don't have a name for him yet, or is he going to be testifying as well?
I can't confirm
Okay.
one way or the other, but he's anonymous to the public.
Okay.
Gary knows who he is. I know who he
Sure,
is.
because he works with him, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. But and again,
Will we find out?
I think that's very likely.
Okay.
I think that's very likely.
Maybe we could find out first.
Ooh,
You're going to break news on
Before Fox, before CBS.
that's right.
One interesting thing that Tristan mentioned earlier, and the process shouldn't work this way, but it does. But you probably wouldn't be able to talk about any of this publicly. And again, this is not a Democrat-Republican thing, because some Republicans would vote the wrong way if the situation was reversed. But if it was a Democrat House of Representatives, none of this would be public right now, I don't think, would it?
Correct.
Because they wouldn't have voted for the authority to allow this to be released to the public. Either side should vote for these things to be released to the public. And in this situation, it's just, by the nature of who's in control of the House right now, that you're even allowed to be talking about this.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because Gary, obviously, if you have, regardless of what your ideological background is, if you have this kind of information, you know it's going to be received one way by one part of the population and probably another way by a different part, right? And so, some people are cheerleading it that don't have any real knowledge of the facts, and I don't know that that's any more helpful, right, than those who just decry it without knowing the facts.
Sure.
And so he really wanted it was really important to him from the get-go that we talked to both Republicans and Democrats. And that's what we did when he was interviewed for 6 hours in D.C. by the Ways and Means Committee. But he has just wanted to bring it forward in as nonpartisan a way as he can. But ultimately, all the Democrats on the committee voted not to release it, and all the Republicans voted to release it.
Crazy.
And again, people are going to have their motivations, but the facts don't change.
Yeah, but
And it didn't work like that when Richard Nixon was involved in Watergate. I think that was pretty bipartisan.
Republicans convinced him to resign because they told him there was no path forward where he came out of this without being
right. And we've become a lot more partisan since then.
Well, I feel like that's kind of the Republican calling card. That's kind of what we do. Like if one of our own is caught doing something. No, am I?
I don't know that I'm with you on that, Ashley.
Well, okay.
I'm giving you the eye. I think both
Maybe
sides
I'm
play
just
this
an
game
idealist.
pretty.
You're right. They probably do.
Maybe not every time.
Well, if I had to bet money, I bet we are a little bit more. I feel like we will turn around and not attack our own, but if someone's doing something wrong that's an elected official, I feel like the Republican Party, at least maybe my experience here in West Virginia, is that I feel like they hold each other accountable a little bit more than Democrats. Am I wrong, JB?
No, you can find good examples, but
Of both, right, right.
Good and bad. Locally, maybe we do a little better job. I'm not sure I'm as confident as what's going on in D.C. to hold each other accountable. But, I definitely think there's an establishment problem within the Republican Party nationally. I think that's an issue.
Well, speaking of, you haven't been on the show since you announced that you are running for the House of Delegates, Tristan, have you?
I came on with my mom. We talked about.
We talked.
Oh, that's right, we did. Yes.
But he hasn't been on since then.
So what's been going on? I know. Have you been active in the campaign?
It's been slower. I had my kickoff fundraiser, and that was great. We raised about $28,000 in the first quarter.
Yes,
so I was happy about that.
That's great. Yeah.
Obviously with so much traveling and everything going on, that's kind of taken some focus away.
Right.
But I look forward to still. Hopefully, more of the summer will be quiet, and as we move into the fall.
Could I have your frequent flyer miles?
I always trick myself into thinking summer's going to be relaxing, and it's just
No.
I feel like it's even busier than the school year.
What's your house district, just generally, so people know?
Is it 53?
Yeah, it's District 53. So it curves from over out Mink Shoals, kind of just the very north part of Edgewood, and then it doesn't include Coonskin Park, but dips under that just north of the river.
Mm-hmm.
I'm over in Woodbridge, and then it goes all the way out to like Bell. It includes all of Campbell's Creek. So just kind of that area north of the river there.
Who is the incumbent in that?
Chris Pritt, but he's running for Secretary of State.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Do you have a challenger yet?
No.
Okay.
So, but even in the course of this summer, I think we're going to start knocking doors. We're going to start sending out mail. Obviously, not having as deep of a background in West Virginia, I want to be able to introduce myself to voters. And,
right.
We're going to be pretty aggressive about that.
I feel like you have been. I see you out and about and going to, committee meetings and so forth. So I feel like you're already doing quite a bit of work. So
I'm doing what I can. But
keep
again,
at it. My daughter just announced she's running for prosecutor for Kanawha County.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Last week we met her down at the county courthouse and she filed her papers. So we'll be right there with you.
Yeah.
Hope she's more successful than I was. And I hope you're successful.
I appreciate that.
We're going to do everything we can to make sure you are. All right. So stick around because we're going to talk a little bit. You guys can, you feel free to chime in. But I wanted to bring up, there was a city council meeting last July 3rd at 8 a.m. in the morning.
And that was early because of Regatta.
Because of Regatta and because of July 4th. And I was there and there was one public speaker, and she came up and she addressed the situation with the homeless people in Charleston.
Do you remember the name?
Her name was Rachel. No, I don't. If I went back in my notes, I could find it.
But we'll get it.
But yeah, she spoke at the council meeting, and she accused the administration of just arbitrarily arresting homeless people on the street and putting them in jail for Regatta.
For the optics.
For the optics, yeah, so that they're,
we wouldn't be embarrassed on the
right
with all the visitors coming into town.
Right. And the mayor didn't really have, she did not, that's one thing that just kind of irritates me. Like when people speak, she doesn't give the respect of looking at them while they're speaking. I just think that's rude. Like even if someone is accusing you of something or, it's uncomfortable, I just feel like you should give someone the respect of standing behind the podium. Is that just me?
You should.
It's like you're uninterested. It's like she's uninterested.
Well, but you also have a role there when the mayor is supposed to be like the chief parliamentarian. It's almost like being the Speaker of the House. You're standing behind the podium. You're not supposed to leave. If you leave, then you've left your position. So, and you obviously should look at folks. And when Danny Jones is the mayor, he always stayed behind the podium. Now, I did see Danny. He was a little verbally rude at times to public speakers. But, if he thought someone was being critical in an unfair way, but he would at least respond to them. The thing I have seen more from, I'm trying to be fair and balanced here, where I talked about the last mayor and the new mayor, the thing I've seen from her, which I agree with, is she just kind of will meander away from the podium, pretend like you're not there, which is it's a physically dismissive thing. Like what you're saying is so
it's
unimportant.
not important.
It's so unimportant. I'm just going to walk away and pretend like you're not even here, which is it's just inappropriate for anybody who's up there to do.
It's just rude. Yeah. And she didn't address it.
Won't answer your she won't respond if she doesn't like what you're saying.
Nope.
I'm not being unfair when I say that. That's just what happens.
I've been to countless meetings, and I have seen people who get up and sing the praises of the administration, and she is all about that. And she, talks back and she looks them in the eye, but the minute someone starts saying something negative or something that she doesn't like, she just walks away and pretends to be writing or whatever, having a conversation with someone.
I would say if she's not standing at the lectern, she's basically throwing the meeting into chaos because she's not in charge anymore. She's supposed to have the gavel and to be there,
to be able to call point of order if she needs to or whatever.
Right.
She doesn't do that. Anyway,
that's
people don't
dereliction.
respond well to criticism.
But that is dereliction of duty once you are not there on the lectern.
Yeah, and here's the thing: she's all about the praise. She takes that, and she likes that. But you've got to be willing, like you said, you got to be able to take both. You've got to be able to take the criticism as well as the praise.
So what did the speaker say? What was her criticism?
Just that she had several of her friends, she called them her friends, but people without homes who were arrested for sleeping in public
At the
or
parks.
at the parks, and they were put in jail with no chance of getting out because the magistrate was gone until after the 4th.
Yeah, I know a couple of them. One in particular is a guy who's around my office on an almost daily basis. I won't say his name. I mean, I'm sure he wouldn't care if I did, but he's a totally harmless guy. He does yell a lot, makes a lot of noise. But literally, if he were screaming something and you walked up to him and you said, I'm going to change his name and say, hey, Bill, how are you? He'd say, oh, hey, buddy. Like he would just calm down, start talking to you. He doesn't pose a threat to anybody. And he's one of the guys who I saw. Somebody sent me the daily incarcerations when this first happened. It was happening a day or two before Regatta when some of us realized what was going on. And I saw his name on that list, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. And he probably had some outstanding warrant, but only because I'm sure he had like a criminal fine or fee he hadn't paid.
Right.
Which is how a lot of these folks wound up in the regional jail is. They weren't initially charged with a jailable offense. Like being in a public park after 11 doesn't send you to jail. You can't
Right.
go to jail for that.
Right.
But if you don't show up to court and pay your court fines, then all of a sudden they can put you in jail because you have an outstanding warrant for your arrest for not paying your court fine. So like that guy is an example of someone who I'm sure hadn't done something jailable, but he doesn't have a penny to his name unless he gets someone who hands him money. So he winds up in jail. And he's one of the examples I can think of. So I know him. And when I saw him when he got out, the following week, his head had been shaved and his beard had been shaved, and he looked different. And
Dang.
So his whole appearance had changed.
Did the regional jail do that? Is that something they do?
When you're in there, maybe he requested it. I don't know. I'm not saying
maybe
they
he
didn't. I didn't ask him.
they-
I did talk to him a little bit. Asked if he was okay.
Well, I think two groups of people were upset about this. The people that, believe the homeless were being tortured and being
Targeted,
abused and
right.
targeted. And then the people who are complaining, well, why do you only do this during Regatta and not during the rest of the year?
Right.
Yeah. And both those criticisms are fair. And,
Yeah.
when I ran in 2018, again, campaigns, Tristan talked about the polarization earlier, it exists. And some people think that you're a bad person and never listen to a word you say, or they think you're great and don't ever criticize you. And, I came down as a law enforcement, pro law enforcement candidate, but I always said you can't arrest your way out of some of these issues. And I've never had a problem with our local homeless who don't cause, criminal mischief. Some of them just need some help. And some folks can't take care of themselves. And they shouldn't go to jail because of that.
Right.
The people who commit violent crimes, I think, always should
Right.
be held accountable. But anyway, I was the one who was criticized and said, "Oh, you just want to arrest everyone."
Sure.
I always said, "No, absolutely not. I don't. A lot of these folks should never spend a second in jail." And then what happens? The person who accused me of being that person
Right.
throws people in jail because they were just trying to clean up the city for just a few days for a party. And then the most offensive thing to me was purposely, no one can say this was accidental or coincidental, purposely closing down municipal court
Yeah.
so that these were high bonds. I saw what the bonds were too. The high bonds they probably couldn't have met anyway. They definitely couldn't meet him if the court was closed. So then they have no choice but to leave them in jail until after Regatta is over, which again, it's just wrong. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
care. Again, and the liberals on this one should be the ones I think probably who should be the most upset.
Well, Chelsea Stillhammer spoke during that meeting, and Joe Solomon spoke during that meeting, and they were very upset. And they
should
asked,
be.
they asked for help to try to get a magistrate into the courtrooms to get these people out.
Well, I heard a rumor that a magistrate didn't want to be involved in this at the outset, and that this had to go like city court. Initially, the city tried to send him to magistrate court. I heard this rumor. I can't say it's 100% true. And the magistrate, I think, kind of knew better and said, "I'm not getting involved in this. This is obvious what's happening." So then they went to city court. That's what I heard.
I don't know, but I do know that Kyle Vass was there,
Yeah.
the one who thinks I'm so dangerous and so powerful.
Well, and you guys kind of agreed on a few things.
We did. He didn't. Okay, so he was there. He's got his ACLU because I guess that's who he works for or whatever. He approached the mayor after the meeting, and she wouldn't have anything to do with it. She just walked right past him.
I think she said she was slammed or too busy, is what she told me.
I'm sure.
And
She had to get to an interview to talk about Regatta.
Yeah, he was a little critical, but he kind of gave her a pass and say, "Hey, I understand that." And I'm like, you wouldn't give most people a pass on this.
No, he wouldn't give me a pass on that. I'll tell you that right now.
Highly critical.
And then, okay, so after that, did anybody go to Regatta?
Well, I went only on Monday during the workday, so
Okay.
because it was like part of my work duties. I
We
walked
did-
over, looked at our tent that we had there,
Right.
and
Yeah.
left.
I did go because I've got an 11-year-old and a grandson who's 5, and we took them to ride the rides, but that's just not my. It's just not my thing.
I normally like stuff like that a lot. We were out of town with family, but
yeah. You know what irritated me is that you pay like $25 for a wristband. You think you're going to be able to ride all these rides, right, with the $25 wristband. But then like the bungee's like an extra $10, or this obstacle course is an extra $10. So that's just me being cheap. Anyways, we did our part. We went down for a little bit. Then there was, after the city council meeting, there was a county commission meeting, which I also attended. And that was the first county commission meeting where Commissioner Kent Carper came back from his illness. And so that was interesting. I did find out that one of the things that they talked about, of course, he didn't address anything, and I didn't expect that he would.
You should. There's an open criminal investigation, so that shouldn't be talked about.
But he walked in there like he didn't miss a beat. And but one thing that was interesting, I did learn that they have to add on to the courthouse because they have to be able to accommodate 3 new magistrates, right?
And a
circuit judge.
Circuit judge, yes.
Right, and that is going to be quite the project.
Easier said than done, and it's got to be done
before the 2024.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where they're going to stick all those folks. I don't know how they're
Well,
going to pull it off.
I don't either. They talked about it. They've obviously done quite a few walkthroughs. But I kept thinking about the sports complex. Like, okay, so you've got to do this huge high dollar renovation to the courthouse, and you're going to do a sports complex, right? And then JB, something else came out where, correct me if I'm wrong, and you might have to fill in the details, and I had forgotten about this, but a private company, right, had approached the city for $3 million to build this sports complex.
Well, that was, I think, they made that application under for some of the federal COVID relief funds, or the American Recovery Act funds, I think, is what they were seeking a grant under.
Right.
They wanted to do their own private sports complex, which I'm sure wouldn't have been as big as the one that's been proposed, but they still proposed a private complex with some public funding.
Some public funding,
right.
But the majority of it was going to. I mean, if they were asking for $3 million,
and I think they had a business partner from out of state, someone who's established in this particular area. They submitted an application, and it was all documented.
Mm-hmm.
So now what you do have public competition with what was previously proposed private entity,
right?
Which they didn't get their grant money either.
That was left up to the city. The city could have given them their grant money, given them the $3 million, and that that would have been the city's, contribution. Yeah, and then the rest of it would be privately funded, and we would have our sports complex.
Yeah,
seems pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, again, we've got too much to talk about, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because we talked about the complex a lot the last time I was here a couple podcasts ago, but the proposed $80 million budget, if that's ever what actually happens in this thing, let's remember that the mall was sold to the current owner for about $10 million just a few years ago, which, of course, that was essentially just kind of like, I think the bank wrote that property down as much as they could and then just offloaded it off their books. But if you were going to spend, and I'm not dumping on a sports complex because I've always said if you have the demand for it and you have the money, build everything you can that's nice. But if we could have bought that mall and then done something
for $10 million
for the whole mall,
right?
I mean if you're
$10 million as opposed to an $8 million,
you would have had to spend more money to change it to
right.
something. But like that mall there's got to be something there with that entire complex.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just going to take a corner of it and put a sports complex, that works out great. But you could have bought that entire mall and done something with it for less than $80 million.
Sure.
Or if you want to dump the whole $80 million into it, you could have transformed that entire mall into something completely different and transformed your whole downtown, which is something we were told was going to happen.
I have a feeling that in that neighborhood, the only way I'm going to get my feet wet is just to jump into the Elk River.
Yeah. I mean, or you could have given this private company $3 million of taxpayer money and let them do all the hard work of the, private funding.
I think we only give away money to nonprofits who've contributed to the.
Sure. Who paid for the Regatta?
I just think sometimes these numbers, it's like they don't mean anything to people who are in office. I mean, $80 million for Charleston and Kanawha County is a lot. That's just such a huge amount of money. And when you think about what you could have done with that, when you consider the fact that the mall sold for only $10 million for the entire thing, and this $80 million is going to be spent on one corner of it allegedly.
Right. And then what are you going to do with the rest of it?
I don't know. Good question.
Okay, I don't know. All right, moving on. So, Kevin Baker, I would like to talk a little bit about the Building Commission. You want to take a break?
Let's take a break first.
All right, so we'll take a break, and when we come back, I'll tell you what I found out from the city attorney and the Building Commission. We'll be right back.
Brought to you in part by Quinn Computers. With many of us working from home, connectivity is more important than ever. Let Quinn Computers in Spring Hill take care of all your computer challenges. Computer and laptop services, all brands. Network troubleshooting and repair. Wireless network VPN installation and support. Security and firewall installation and support. Backup and recovery service, remote system administration, and more at quintechnology.com.
If you would like to tie your business with this popular podcast, you can contact me, Ron Hughes, to advertise at ron.hughes, ron.hughes at wvradio.com, or you could call me at 304-342-8131. You're listening to the Scoop Squad Truth Squad, brought to you in part by Quinn Computers in Spring Hill and by Eggplant on Bridge Road.
And we're back with the third scoop of the Scoop Squad Truth Pod. And we're here with JB Akers and Tristan Leavitt and executive producer Ron Hughes. I'm Ashley Switzer. Okay, so we've got a lot of dilapidated properties around Charleston. I have several in my neighborhood, probably 10 on Oakmont Road alone, with overgrown grass and so on and so forth. And in my research and in my digging, trying to find out who these properties belong to, a name came up, and we've talked about him on the podcast here before. His name's Bob Johns, and he has a property company. He's an attorney here in town, but he owns over 150 parcels of properties here in Charleston, West Virginia, and most of them are dilapidated.
Speaking of overgrown grass, I was noticing some dilapidated properties off of Washington Street East, and some of them have overgrown grass growing out of the gutters.
Yeah, it's and that's one thing that people will say. Now, I will say that at the last couple city council meetings, city council members have talked to people from out of state, people who are coming to Regatta and so forth, and they love West Virginia. They rave about Charleston, but everybody that talks so highly about Charleston says you've got to do something about the vacant structures.
Absolutely.
That's just what they say. And, I have tried, in my mind, I feel like you should be able to go back and locate a property or locate a property owner and track how much that property owner is paid in fees and fines. Wouldn't you think that would be something that would be helpful?
Well, I think that's, kind of how the city of St. Albans ended up taking over the dilapidated St. Albans Junior High. The owner had been fined and so much, to such a large extent, that they were able to come up with a deal to turn that property over to the city of St. Albans to cover up, the fines and assessments that
yes.
he's had.
Well, we in Charleston, so I emailed Attorney Baker, and I just wanted to know how much this property owner, happens to be Bob Johns and his property company, for this one house on Oakmont Road, how much he's paid in fees and fines. Because, that it's been in this such shape for years, and you would think that that they would have a record of that, but unfortunately there is no way to be able. He says, what did he say here? None of these properties have had a lien filed against it as of now. The typical practice for the building department is to send citations, and if citations remain unpaid, then they eventually file a lien or bring criminal charges in municipal court for the building code violations. Since there have not been liens filed on this property, I believe the citations have either been paid or are under $1,000 in total. Well, that... You didn't give me the information I asked for.
I'm guessing that's why this is happening. What he's saying.
I'm asking you for this information, and it should be able to be readily available. But
well, that's that thing too you're talking about it's been a recurring issue, one of the most important issues in the city for years. I don't mean the number four, but for a number of years. And I'm sure the number is probably pretty consistent with what it's been for a while. You talk about priorities and spending money for $2 to $3 million. I'm sure this number is still about the same. Could be a little less now, actually, because I think the city has torn some stuff down. It's not that they've done nothing,
right?
But I'd say for probably $2 to $3 million, or maybe even a little less, you could tear down every vacant city in the structure in the city of Charleston. I know what the cost is. It's less than $10,000 for a normal house to tear it down. And the inventory is usually around a couple hundred houses in the city, citywide. I know you couldn't go in and do it all in one day.
Right.
But I'm just saying, if you prioritized it, that is something that could be done in political terms fairly quickly if that was a priority.
But so is the building department just going, I mean, how do they know when to place a lien on it if they don't have the information about the fines and the fees?
Well, the building commissioner has the authority to do that.
Yeah, but
They have access to that information. He's just not giving it to you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they can tell.
well, how do I get that information? I want that information.
You'll probably have to FOIA it and see if they give
Yeah,
it to you
file a
that way.
public records request.
That's ridiculous, y'all.
That's probably the only way you're going to get
It's
it.
like Sherry, when she was complaining about the government not wanting to answer her questions or call her back.
Yeah, you
I just
think
feel like it's a simple question.
you think those things only happen in rural communities, kind of places that are far away from, modern media sources or several pieces of media to
Right.
cover it. But no, it happens. It happens in Chicago. It happens in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
It happens in counties all over.
And that's just not a good answer for me.
So, Charleston's not any better.
I can't remember if you asked JB McCuskey about this when he was here last, about the bill from last year to streamline the process on.
Yes, I did. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that episode.
Well, but there was also, aside from what he has, which helps on the financial side of it, there was a bill several years prior passed in the legislature that gave cities a streamlined ability to tear these structures down. So there have been a couple changes that have been made, and the former city attorney, Paul Ellis, was pivotal in that. So a couple things have happened that have made the process easier. It is easier than it used to be.
Yeah.
So.
Well, as a concerned citizen with one of these properties, several of these properties on my street, I just, I want that information so that I can put it out there.
So is that the city attorney that had interactions with our guests last week?
Yes. Yeah. So speaking of, Tristan, I'm not sure if you got a chance to listen to our episode that we did last week. It was quite the shocker.
Pot boiler?
Yeah, it was
steamy.
We had a guest on our show. Her name is Jenny Harless, and she had some unpleasant encounters with the chief of police of Charleston, and she admits her part in it. She is not saying that she didn't participate in some of what happened. She obviously did, but the part that was disturbing to her and that she wanted addressed was the fact that Tyke Hunt and his wife, after Jenny Harless blocked them on Facebook and they could no longer get a hold of her, they then contacted their friends at the FBI and the state police.
Or someone. I'm not sure if we should say friends yet, but they talked to somebody.
Somebody
Okay.
that knew somebody.
Yeah.
Somebody that knew somebody, and who, the FBI and the state police then went to Jenny's house, or first went to her place of work at the state house, which that would be the thing that would unnerve me the most, was having someone like that show up at my place of work. That's just not, that just is unacceptable.
That wouldn't happen if you weren't the police chief
Right.
and the wife of the police chief.
Right, and it turns out she was working from home that day, so they showed up at her house, and they basically just really didn't do anything,
It was an intimidation visit.
Yes.
I can't think of any legitimate reason that the FBI would be doing that. That's not the sort of thing that they would typically open a case on in any way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's very specific protocols they have for opening cases, opening preliminary investigations.
Mm-hmm.
I want to real quickly, just so that your listeners know, and I'm not commenting on that situation, but one of the things that Tristan has done that I've followed the news is you've actually represented some FBI whistleblowers in a high-profile case. You actually were sworn in and testified, I think, in Congress recently during your representation of those FBI whistleblowers.
Yes.
So for folks who are listening, Tristan's not just blowing smoke here. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to this stuff.
We did it when I worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee. There were lots and lots of cases involving FBI misconduct that we investigated, right? And so FBI agents can't just go flash a badge around for whatever they want, right? There are protocols that they have to follow. And so again, I don't know many of the details of this at all. but it's just very difficult to imagine a scenario where
that would be okay.
Where it would be
warranted.
official,
Well, and she asked for a card too, and they didn't give her a card,
a business card.
a business card. They didn't give her a card, and then she.
that's actually not uncommon. But
Well, he said, call me, he said, call the 800 number if you need to get in touch with me. And when she called the 800 number after he left, they told her to not call again. Like stop bothering, don't bother us again with this. We have better things to do.
yeah,
And then when she contacted, was it Barnett with, she contacted someone with the city or,
The HR
protection board, or not the protection board. That's who you worked for. An agency, whatever. He said, call the FBI. She's like, I did, and they told me not to call back.
Are you talking about the professional standards
Professional
board
standards
with
board.
the city of Charleston
Yes,
Police
yes,
Department?
yes.
Yeah, whoever worked at the professional standards board, because the chief of police is the head of the professional standards board, so they would be investigating. He'd be investigating himself, which obviously he can't do. So this is Jenny's side of the story.
Yes.
Of course, Chief Hunt, being fair, when I was on here talking about Kent Carper about a month or so ago, I said that everyone should have a right to defend themselves. If Chief Hunt has a version of this story he'd like to tell, then at some point he should be allowed to do that. But the fact, I guess, is that she called professional standards, and they told her to call the FBI, and she said they told me not to call.
Right.
So she then felt like she had nowhere to turn.
She's in a quandary.
yeah, she's talking to the wrong folks. I mean, again, it would be FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility or the Inspector General. Ultimately, because regardless of whatever their interactions were between Chief Hunt and this individual, and again, I don't know that, but there's just not a scenario where the FBI gets involved from there, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah, and let's be clear too. No one here, I don't think, is accusing the people who show up at our house. Until everyone gets a full story. Like, I know that Tristan's not saying the FBI guy did anything in particular wrong until you know all the facts. But it certainly raises questions as to, because Jenny's version, I think, and she said this was on her Ring doorbell camera recorded, so you would have to.
We heard it.
I've seen it. Mm-hmm.
One of the things she said was that she was told by the FBI agent and the state trooper who came with him, essentially, you're not in trouble. Which then begs the question of, and this is just a natural question, no accusation, it begs the question of, well, if she's not in trouble, then what is the FBI doing at her house? Because the FBI doesn't come to someone's house and say, be nice. That's not what they do.
Stop doing that.
Right. So, if you go there saying you're not in trouble, I mean, you're just doing an investigation of what? What's the potential crime here, which it appears there could not have ever been one. I mean, again, whatever she did. Yeah. If you think that what she did was petty and mean, that's fine. You can have that opinion. This was I guess what you'd say in Southern West Virginia terms, kind of an ugly situation between these people. Mm-hmm. But did it warrant a visit from law enforcement? That's a question worth asking.
And did it warrant a better look from the city attorney? I mean, he said that there was an investigation, but was there?
Yeah, I mean, I know Chief Hunt not well. I wish this had never happened because I always liked him. And I'm not saying I don't anymore. He hasn't told his version of what happened, but something happened. And there are questions here that should be answered. And what I would say, too, how this would differ from what we're seeing with Kent Carper's situation is the county requested a special prosecutor to look at Kent Carper's situation as to whether or not he is guilty of, for example, committing a lewd act,
right?
Which some of what Jenny alleged, I think you would say, again, if she's correct, would be a lewd act. Potentially.
Well, we have the photographic evidence.
Well, I mean, the text messaging by itself, if it's consensual, that's not what I'm talking about. But she said some things happened.
But he got naked in his
City
office,
Hall, which
yes.
I'm not saying he did or he didn't.
Right.
I have no idea.
That's her story.
That's her story. He should have a chance to rebut that if he wants. But the county requested a special prosecutor for Kent Carper's situation, and also because of some communications he may have had. But the city investigated this on its own internally. And I think, again, I don't care what your politics are, we should all demand more from our government in that situation. The city should not be investigating itself when you're talking about its highest ranking law enforcement official who only answers to the mayor. And that stays, that's an HR matter only, doesn't get referred out. I mean, that's, again, don't care who the mayor is, don't care the politics. That's something I don't think should be handled internally because there's just too much of a natural conflict there.
Right.
And I'm not saying that he's guilty or innocent. He may be able to prove some of this stuff.
But just if he didn't do anything wrong, just open the investigation, tell everybody what you found.
Well, there's not transparency here. So again, the Kent Carper situation was handled completely differently, and it appears because people wanted him to be treated differently. This situation, it appears the city tried to keep it quiet. Like when Kent Carper's situation, Channel 13 got a copy of a police report somehow from the city of Charleston while there is an open criminal investigation. In that situation, the only people who should have a copy of a police report should be the police and the prosecutor. And that's standard practice. Now, once the charges are either not going to be filed or they're filed, the public gets to see it. But the media had a copy of a police report in Kent Carper's situation while there's an ongoing criminal investigation, which just that never happens.
You can't get that even through a FOIA
No,
request.
that's, no, that's a legitimate basis to say you don't get it yet. Public, eventually you will, but not yet. Somehow the news, I mean, somehow obviously it was leaked purposely by someone from within the city, but then this situation, again, handled differently. No one knows anything about what happened, even after the investigation was closed.
Right.
So the investigation is closed and they're saying, sorry, it's a private HR matter, which I respect that process, but still, this is one that's so significant. You have to ask, are things being treated the same for different people? And again, not a criticism of Chief Hunt. I'm criticizing the process.
Right, absolutely. I agree.
If the investigation's closed, I mean, an HR matter relates to two employees, right? You can't just say of anything, it's an HR, it's a member of the public making allegations against a public figure. That's not an HR matter. So there needs to be more. I mean, if they conducted an investigation, they should at least be able to give some form of their findings.
But that's what they're saying. The mayor has said, I'm not going to comment on HR issues.
Another thing that was brought up, and again, this doesn't have anything.
But I mean, is there something that a citizen can do, Tristan, in that?
I'm not familiar with the city records laws, but I think it's different to just ask Mayor Goodwin to comment on it versus, okay, we'd like to see, provide some reckoning of the investigation that was conducted.
Okay.
She doesn't have to be the spokesperson for that.
Right.
Well, we don't need to see the discipline that maybe the police chief had received, but we should be able to see what happened, as far as investigating this incident.
Yeah.
Well, there should be comments too. Another troubling thing I found, and again, doesn't go towards guilt or innocence of anyone, but Ms. Harless, when she was on here, said that she was called in and asked to be interviewed by the city attorney and the HR supervisor or head of HR, and she voluntarily went in by herself without counsel, just on her own, told her side of the story then, and showed them her phone, which she said had this evidence on it of, alleged misconduct, which I haven't seen it. I don't know what's on her phone, but she asked them if they wanted copies of it, and her version is they declined said we don't want copies. They just scrolled through and looked at some of it, but they declined. So how do you perform?
That's not an investigation.
So I think a legitimate question, regardless of who the people are, is, and if this was my administration, I would expect this question to be asked, is how do you do a full investigation if you don't even ask for the information that's being offered to you that's proof, allegedly, of some type of misconduct. And you look at the information, maybe it exonerates him in some respect, maybe it hurts him. I don't know what it shows, but I don't know how you say, no, we don't need that.
Don't either. It's confusing.
They know basically nothing by ignoring the pictures and the copies of the text.
And then send her an email that we've done our investigation. We hope this gives you closure.
There's no investigation if they didn't see the information.
Right. And then the public response is it's an HR matter. So anyway, it's unfortunate because I'm really pro. Generally, I mean, they should be held accountable if they do something wrong. I'm pro police.
Absolutely.
And like I said, I've always liked Chief Hunt.
He's a great guy. I've met him several times.
I like him. So, and I know personally this is probably horrible because something happened. He has a family. I hate that part of it. But regardless of who's involved, the investigation should be handled in a transparent and fair manner. Absolutely. I think there are serious questions about what happened with this one, regardless of who the people are.
If you make, no matter how great of a guy you are, if you make an error in judgment in your official capacity, you should be held accountable.
Well, and like I said to you earlier, JB, attitude reflects leadership, and the attitude here is just one of, I'm not accountable.
It's the same as the Calhoun County Commission.
Well, I would also, if I was a patrol officer, would be asking if I'm held to the same. And again, no guilt or innocence judgment here. I don't know really all the stuff of what happened, but I don't think a patrol officer necessarily may have been treated this way, and I think they probably realized that.
Well, if a patrol officer had done this and had brought an individual into their car, into their official police vehicle, and performed these acts, would there be some kind of punishment? Isn't that the same as doing it in an office?
A robust investigation, without question.
There have been patrol officers who have done that before, and the outcome is not. I mean, I know that personally. The outcome has not been great for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we still have a lot of answers, no, we don't have answers. We have
Well,
questions.
there are answers
There's
out there.
answers, we just don't have them. But we're going to keep trying to get them.
I hope that was in stereo.
And we are going to be at the next city council meeting. I have heard from a few. I actually sent every single city council member individually an email with the podcast link asking them to listen. I sent it to Mayor Goodwin. I sent it to every county commissioner. And I did get some response backs from some city council people who were very, very disturbed by it.
The consensual messages back and forth, that's personally embarrassing and anything I think that really warrants a huge amount of criticism. But I really think it's the what the city did with the information after the fact and the visit by law enforcement to her work and her home. Again, if there's a legitimate explanation, let's hear it.
I just want to hear it.
Yeah,
I just want to know why.
Yeah, if you can give it to us, so be it. But that warrants an explanation.
Absolutely.
And then all of this goes away.
That's right. That's right. Well, okay, that's 3 scoops.
That's right.
Tristan, I am so glad that you came.
He's got his own Wikipedia page. That's how important he is.
Wow.
Oh,
I don't know who created that a few years ago.
It's Wikipedia where you find all the greatest information, and you know it's all true.
We know you were on Fox, but did CNN or MSNBC have you on?
No.
Well,
They had my
well, that's
co-counsel Mark
interesting.
Lytle on.
Yeah.
Right. There's at the biggest developments. Then
Yeah.
they've covered some elements of it.
Well, I think that you are just fascinating, and I think it's just amazing that you've brought your family to live here in West Virginia, and you're, working such a high-profile case and on national news with the Capitol Dome in the background. It's just super cool.
Yeah, he's a real asset to have here.
Yes,
We love it. We
Super
love it
glad.
here.
It's super glad, and I'm excited to put you to work for West Virginia.
Thank you.
All right, Ron.
Well, thank you. I want to thank our sponsors.
Yeah.
I want to thank Eggplant on Bridge Road. I want to thank T Graphics on the west side and the wonderful Claudette, who does great work on uniforms and shirts and other screen graphics, screen printing, and embroidery. Who else do we have? Quinn Computers.
Yep. And Stanley Steamer.
We have that coming. And also Americans for Prosperity will be our sponsor starting in August.
That's right. Lisa is going to come on in, I think, next podcast and give us an update on the Kanawha County School Board and the meetings that she's had there. She actually met with the superintendent and a few school board members yesterday, so she'll be back pretty soon to give us an update on that.
Sounds great.
All right. We will talk at y'all next week, Charleston.
Thank you, Ashley.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. Bye.
Rebroadcast, retransmission, or transcription is not permissible without the expressed approval of Scoop Squad Truth Squad. Copyright 2023.